So today we're going to work on our Happy Cat Mouse toy. We're going to go through our pattern step by step, and then we're going to discuss the stages of crochet. Before we go further, I want to make sure, just like any sort of project, it always works best if you make sure you have all your supplies handy. And they're listed here on the sheet for you. It talks about the worsted weight yarn. This is obviously more than 1 ounce of worsted weight or medium weight yarn, but it's a great project for little odds and ends of yarn that you might have, just in case you need something to do with those little odds and ends. You will also need a size G crochet hook. Sometimes it's referred to as a 6 or a 4.25 millimeter crochet hook. Those should all be provided for you. And then you also want to have a little bit of polyfill and safety eyes as provided. And then of course you'll need to provide your own scissors for this project. And there are some optional things that you can provide, catnip or bell, if you want to include those inside the toy. And you may like to use a stitch marker. Sometimes helps you find the ends of rows. You can also use a flexible metal paper clip for the same purposes. And some people find it helpful to use a yarn needle for finishing. You don't have to have any of those things though to make this work. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to get through the pattern. And it's got some information on the pattern abbreviations. We'll go through those. I've tried to list some pattern tips for you. For example, you want to make the ears and the tail first so you can attach them as you crochet. It'll just make things easier for you. And I have those separated here for you. And we'll go through kind of step by step how this is going to come together. So what we want to do, of course, is start with our tail, which is a chain 30. You can do more if you would like a larger tail. So I'm going to scoot my pattern out of the way. And we're going to go ahead and pull our yarn, and we're going to start by making our slip knot. And of course, you're just going to pinch the yarn, and then you're going to draw the yarn around back, and going through the loop, you're going to grab that yarn in the back and pull it through. And then as I'm pulling through, I'm going to let go with my other hand. That way we've got this nice slip knot that will move. And then if I pull it all the way out, it will release completely. There won't be any knot left in there. That's what we want. And this is a little bit long as far as this end is sometimes referred to as the tail, which is ironic since we're talking about the tail, but we can trim that up a little bit later. So what we're going to do, according to the pattern, we want to do a chain 30. And I'm going to go ahead and get my yarn set up for the tension. And I'll hold my hand this way so you can kind of see how I manage the tension a little bit. This part, that way it lets the yarn go through, but not so quickly as to make the gauge or the tension too loose. So then I'm going to grab my crochet hook. Because I hold my crochet hook in my dominant hand, my non-dominant hand will have the tension. So what I'm going to do the chain is I'm going to go ahead and push the hook through my slip knot and then tighten it just a little bit. And then kind of readjust this. And then I will be moving my non-dominant hand further along as we go. So this is not going to be a static position. I think you'll see what I mean when I start. So I'm going to go ahead and yarn over and draw through for my first chain. And then after I've drawn through, see how the slip knot is kind of really big? If I were to make another chain here, that would be super loose. I'm just going to tighten it up just a little bit. And you can get really good at, over time, at kind of feeling how tight or how loose the chain should be. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little closer in here so you guys can see what I'm doing. All right, so here is the first chain. So I'm going to do that again, yarn over and draw through. And there's the second chain. And you can see that the first chain and the second chain, the first chain is a little bit loose. So I can just go ahead and draw that back out and tighten it up. And you get accustomed to undoing or pulling out and putting your stitches back in. So again, it's yarn over and pull through, tighten it up a little bit. And then I move my non-dominant hand down a little, just the tiniest bit. Yarn over, pull through. And there's my second chain. And when I do my chains, I always make sure to twist the hook a little in, because if you pull it straight through, you'll end up fighting yourself here. You can see how the hook is pulling exactly against my working loop. But if I twist it just a tiny bit, it makes it easier. So there's my third chain. And this is another good opportunity to look at how you can count these things. And I'm going to use my yarn needle to demonstrate. So this is one stitch, this is one stitch, and this is one stitch. So if you lose track of where you are, you can always stop and count. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then at the very bottom here, you can see that slip knot that we made at very first. I'm just going to go ahead and finish up this chain. And while it isn't super crucial for this, it's always good habit to go back and check, make sure you've gotten all your chains properly counted. So I'm going to go ahead and count mine. Looks like I'm 4 short. 26. 30. And if you wanted to double check, you could, if you were really interested in being precise. For some patterns, you really need to be precise. This one, it's not nearly as crucial. So once you've finished the correct number of chains, we need to go ahead and fasten off. And fastening off is very easy for crochet work. What we're going to do is give it a little bit of a tail here. Because we need to have a length that we can sew this on our mouse toy. So I'm going to, pick a few inches and go ahead and snip my yarn here. And then in order to do the fasten off, I'm just going to take my crochet hook and just pull it straight up. And if you can see that the slip knot is just getting bigger and bigger, and then it comes all the way through, and then you just tighten it up a hair. And there, pull back a little bit here, there is the tail. So I'm going to go ahead and set the tail to the side, and we can get started on working on those ears. So the ears are going to be slightly more complicated than the tail. That was very straightforward. It was just a direct chain. What we're going to do with the ears is create a little circles, and they'll be very small. So again, we're going to go ahead and start with the slip knot, and I'm going to take my yarn and draw it around back and pull it through. And for this recording, just in the interest of time, I'm going to record just one of the ears, making just one. If you need the instruction for the second one, go ahead and rewind back up the playback, and you'll be able to see it again. So after we've got our slip knot, we're going to go ahead and set up our tension. The hand tension is going to be like right here. Get the tail kind of pointed down. And then we're going to go ahead and take the hook and push it through the slip knot. And on our pattern, we see that we're going to chain 3. So that's just the same thing that we were doing just a minute ago. So we're going to go ahead and chain 3. So again, I'm going to go fairly slow. 1, 2, 3. So now we've got the chain 3, and then we're going to do the abbreviation, and I hope you noticed that the abbreviations listed on your pattern underneath the optional supplies, the pattern abbreviation. The SLST is a pretty common pattern abbreviation for slip stitch, and I'll show you how that works. So we're just going to take our hook, and we're going to rather than going back the other direction, we're going to create a circle out of our chain. So I'm going to push this through the first chain. So now I've got 2 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to do a yarn over, and I'm going to draw through both of them. So if you see here, it's creating this a little circular form. And I don't know if you can see what happened here with my yarn, but sometimes it will clump up like this. And that just means when a yarn skein is created, it's twisting multiple threads together, and sometimes some of them get missed. So if your hook misses them, you can always just back up and go, and sometimes that's the easiest way to do it, is just back up and go again to make your slip stitch or whatever stitch you were trying to work on. It does happen. So we're going to do the slip stitch one more time just to show you how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and push it through the first stitch, draw my yarn through 1 loop and through the second loop. So now we've kind of created this little circle, all right, that we're going to work in. So that's the first row of the ears. And on the second row in the instructions, I don't know if you can see that there, but it says working in the round, don't turn. And the reason that we're going to do that is we're going to be working in a kind of a spiral form instead of going up and over, which is how some patterns work. So we're just going to be going around in circles. This is where that stitch marker can help quite a bit, and I'll show you how that works. So we're going to put in if you look at what row, the directions for row 2 are, stitch 2 single crochets in each chain. So each chain all the way around is going to get 2 stitches, and it's kind of easy to lose your place here, which is why a stitch marker can be a real help. You use the stitch marker to show which is the first stitch in your new row. All right, so here is where I finished creating row 1, and I can see here, this is another important part of counting. If I can focus this a little bit better so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But each one of these loops is the chain. So I've got 1, 2, 3. So in order to start, I need to start in that first chain. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1 single crochet in this first chain. And if you remember, first the single crochet. So you're going to push through the chain, yarn over and draw through 1, and then yarn over and draw through both loops. Okay, and then tighten it up. And this is where, since this is the first stitch in my new row, this is where I would want to use my stitch marker. So I'm going to go ahead and you just open it. This is, and you can see how a paper clip, I think, would work the same way. So if you open it and then just kind of push it through that first stitch, and then you close it, you'll be able to keep track of where you started. it can be a real help, especially in working in the round project like this. Okay. All right, so there's the first stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and push through the same stitch, the one that we were just in, because remember we're doing 2 single crochets in each chain. I'm going to go ahead and yarn over and pull through, and yarn over and then pull through again. Okay, so there's 2 stitches in there, and then we're going to put 2 stitches in the next chain, and that's going to be right here. Okay, and then second stitch goes exactly in the same spot. All right, and then if you lose track again, you can go through and count what you've done. So 1, 2, 3, and then this is the first one back at the beginning, 4. Okay, so we, and it's a pretty common thing that you'll see the number of stitches per row at the very end of each row. So of course this says 6. All right, so that we did 4, so we have 2 more to do in this last chain. And it looks a little funky until we get a little bit more room on it. Okay, and now we're back to the beginning. So we've done 6 stitches on this particular row, and the third row of the ears is just single crocheting once in each stitch all the way around. And when you are using a stitch marker, if you weren't using one, you could just keep going. But when you are using a stitch marker, you need to take it out at the beginning of each row for this kind of project. Sometimes you can get away with leaving it in for a while, but we're not going to do that for this. So I'm going to go ahead and create my first stitch in my row 3, which is just a single crochet. I'm going to go ahead and yarn over and pull through 1 and pull through again. And I think you can see that it's starting to shape up a little bit, our ear. So I'm going to go ahead and reinsert my stitch marker. All right, so there's 1. And now, because we're doing just 1 stitch in every stitch, so there's only 6 all the way around, we don't need to put 2 in 1. So we did 1 there, and then we're going to go do the next stitch. So we're going to push through to the next stitch, 1, and through both. And you tighten it up a little bit as we go. Here's our third stitch. I'm going to go ahead and last stitch. So there's our ear. And of course, to finish, we're going to go ahead and remove our stitch marker. Okay, and it's pretty similar finishing for this kind of for a project in the round like this. It's going to be fairly similar to what we were doing with the chain. And I'm going to go ahead and trim off the excess. Okay, and then once again, you're just going to pull it all the way through. Okay, and there's our first little ear. All right, so now that we have 2 ears and our tail ready, we can go ahead and start working on the body. So I'm going to push these to the side. We will need them for this process, but that way they're close. So if you flip your instructions on the second page, this is the part where you can start working on the body. And I will remind you, this may be a good moment to stop and do some hand stretches. It does get to feel kind of constrained on your hands if you've been working at it for a while. Don't stress. This is a new project, but it doesn't have to be a stressful one. So if you need to take a pause, make sure you do that. Take care of yourself. So we're going to start here after you're rested and ready to go with creating the next row of your body. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start again with a slip knot. And tighten it up a little. And our instructions say that we're going to start with a chain 4 and slip stitch together. I'm going to go ahead and work, get my tension created. And we're going to do a chain 4. And this will also be working in the round on the body. All right, and then slip stitch together. So we're going to again make a circle out of this. So I'm going to go back to the very first chain, push my hook through, do a yarn over and pull through one, and then pull through the second one. Okay, so once again, we've created a little loop. All right, so then going back to our pattern, working in the round. So what we're going to do is single crochet 6 in the circle. And what that means is it's slightly different than working in the chains. There's a circle that's created here. It's kind of a little challenging to see. Let me see if I can get a little closer here on the camera. There is, of course, you know, since we created this circle, there is the chain that we're working on the outside, and then there's the circle in the very middle. And what we're going to do is we're going to be putting stitches in the very middle, okay, rather than in each individual. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 6 single crochets in the circle. I'm going to go ahead and get my tension going again. All right. So I'm going to put my first single crochet in the middle. All right. And again, I find it easier to use especially when working in a round, using either the stitch marker, or in this case, I'm going to use a paper clip just to show you what I mean by that. So you can do the exact same thing with paper clip, and it works just the same. So we're going to do 6 single crochets, and we've done 1. Again, going in the same spot in the center. All right, so there's 6 single crochets all the way around, and we'll be moving to our next row. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to row 3. We're going to put 2 stitches in each single crochet all the way around. So we're going to start here. And so I'm going to go ahead and just do 1 single crochet. And then put a second one in there. Get my tension good. Want to make sure you're getting both of those loops there. So once you've reached the end of your row, I find it helpful to just kind of count, just to make sure I haven't made any errors, just to count the stitches. So according to the pattern, I'm supposed to have 12 stitches in this row. So that way I know I've finished my row completely. And as you can see, it's starting to spiral out, and we'll continue to do that. All right, so now that we've completed row 4, if we look at our instructions, you want to go ahead and attach the tail tightly. And it is really, it will be a lot easier to do it this way, to go ahead and take care of attaching your tail. And if you look, you can see that there's kind of a different look between the back and the front. And this is the quote unquote right side, and this is the quote unquote wrong side of it. You can decide what you would like to be on the outside of it. Of course, the tail has to get attached to the outside. I found personally that when I did my demonstrations, I like the way that it looked better with the quote unquote right side on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and put that here. We're going to go ahead and attach the tail for the mouse at this point, according to our instructions. It's easier to do it, I found, now than to do it later. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to pull the end of this piece of the crochet, which is of course on the tail, through the other side, so it's inside, so that both of them are there, and that attaches this part of the yarn to the crochet. Now it does make it a little bit challenging to work with this here, but I find it more easy to work with the tail present now than to try to attach it later after additional rows have been done. So I strongly recommend trying it both ways if you end up doing multiple versions of this particular project. So to tie it, again, I just pulled the end, the non-crocheted part, through. And what I want to do is I'm just going to knot it together. Make a real nice strong knot, so that way it won't fly out there very easily. And this is so that the right side of the crochet piece will be on the outside and the quote unquote wrong side will be on the inside. You'll have to decide how you like the look of each individual one. If you prefer that the quote unquote wrong side is out. This is just what I preferred when I did my demonstration project. Okay, and we'll weave these ends in a little bit. And in order to weave the ends in, we're just going to kind of go in and out of the rows here to try to give them a little bit more, make it a little more stabilized. I won't go quite all the way to the end, so I'm going to weave it in that way. So I'm just taking the ends and weaving it through the other crochet piece, kind of hiding the ends, but also kind of stabilizing it as well, because as most people know, pets can be a little bit rough on toys. So I'm just going to pull this through. Okay, and I've pulled it through a couple of stitches. I'm going to pull it through a couple more before I do another knot. And it's not very particular, so if you don't do it exactly this way, please don't worry about it. It's just trying to hide parts of the ends as well as stabilize it a little bit. And then I'm going to pull this right back through the middle again, just where we started. Okay, and then I'm going to knot this one more time. Just like a little extra stability, especially when you're dealing with toys for pets or toys for kids. A couple extra knots is not going to hurt anything. So I'm going to go ahead and tie that off again, and then I'm just going to trim it. And all this will be hidden inside the body of the mouse. So this is the tail part going out, and this will be the inside where we're going to put the polyfill. All right, so that's attaching the tail. So now we're going to go ahead and go on to row number 5. excuse me, we're going to go on to row number 4, and that's going to be a single crochet and then with 1 increase every other stitch. So we'll start with 1, and this is where I'll put my stitch marker in. And now we can go ahead and remove the stitch marker. And we're going to go to row 5 here. So that's a 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, and then 2 single crochets. Okay. And then 2 in the same stitch. And you may notice that this has a little bit of flattening on some of the sides. That's pretty typical for the increases. It's just giving it a little space, so it's not going to be precisely rammed all the way around. So now we can go to rows 6 and 7, which are going to be single crochets all the way around. And as this starts to get larger, you can start to curve it. So that way this will form the bottom of the mouse. Okay, so there is row 6, and we can go on to row 7, and that's going to be exactly the same. All right, and that's the end of row 7. So once you've completed rows 6 and 7, then we're going to go ahead and work on row 8, which begins the decrease. And according to the pattern, we're going to single crochet in one stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, and then decrease. And we'll do that all the way around. So we're going to go ahead and remove the stitch marker here. And I'm going to start with this first single crochet. And to do the decrease, I'm going to start by starting a single crochet in one stitch, and then start a single crochet in the other stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull through both of those stitches. And that will start to bring the mouse body, start making it smaller at this point. So it's going to taper off. So again, one single crochet. And then we're going to go ahead and decrease. So there's the first start, second start, and then we're going to pull it all together. Okay, so we're just going to keep doing that all the way around. All right, and then just to double check, we did come out with an even number, but just to double check, it's always a good idea to go back and check your stitch count. So it says we should have 18, and we have 18, so that's good news. All right, and then I'm moved down to rows 9 and 10, and once again, we're going to single crochet all the way around in each stitch. All right, so there's the end of row 9. And now we can start doing the exact same thing on row 10. All right, so there's 10. All right, and then we're going to start on row 11. And then, so that's a single crochet in each of the first 7 stitches and then decrease 1. All right. Okay, so there's my 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we'll do the next 2 together. So we're going to do the first stitch and then pull through the second stitch and then connect them. Okay, and we'll repeat that. So another 7. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and do the decrease here. All right, and then just to double check. And then in my tips, I've listed here, you want to start stuffing the body, because as you can see, we're starting to really taper this off. And so you want to start adding some of the polyfill here. So you don't want so much that you're interfering with what you're doing. If you were going to add a bell or catnip at this point, this would be the point you'd want to do that. So just get some in there. All right, you don't want to go beyond the edge of where you're at, though. It'll start really interfering with what you're working on. So we're going to go ahead and go on to row 12, where we're going to single crochet in each of the next 6 stitches and then decrease 1. We're going to go on to row 12. And in row 12, it does say to single crochet in each of the next 5 stitches and then decrease, but it should say 6 stitches, obviously, since we aren't going to have, if we do it with only 5, we wouldn't have quite enough stitches to go all the way around. And this is the decrease. And then there's the final decrease. And again, you want to just count the stitches, make sure that we have enough. And there is an additional note here at the end, keep adding the polyfill. So as we go, we're going to keep doing some more stuffing in there. And then row 13 is correct. So we're going to go ahead and do the single crochet in each of the next 5 stitches and then decrease 1. As you can tell, it's getting a little bit more difficult holding the work. So you can start to pinch it here to kind of save your fingers. tempting to continue to hold it like this, but hold it more like, hold the body more. It'll help your hands, and you'll still be able to control the work. And here's the decrease. And then one more decrease. And again, we want to do a stitch count. All right, and so I'm going to give it a little bit more polyfill. You can decide how fat or how thin of a mouse you would like. And at this point in the pattern, we're going to go ahead and attach the ears. We're on row 13, and so we're going to go and attach the ears at about row 11, so kind of a couple of rows before where you are, because we're going to work all the way down to a complete taper off. So we're going to go ahead and place the ears at about a row 11, so a couple of rows from where we are. And we're going to leave a couple of rows, or yes, a couple of stitches between them. So this is row 13, so 12, 11. And you can decide which side will be the top of the mouse and the bottom of the mouse. Really doesn't matter. It's just what you prefer. And so I'm just taking my hook and pushing it in. This would be a part where you could also use a yarn needle if you prefer to draw them through. So I'm just going to take those tails that we have on the ends of the ears, and I'm going to pull one through here. Pull that all the way through. I'm going to give it one stitch between each side of the ears. You can do as you prefer if you want to give it a little bit of a wider look. I'm also going to take the yarn tail and pull it so that they're both kind of close to the same point on the ear. So I'm going to pull this all the way through here, and it kind of makes the ears into a little cup. Go ahead and pull that through here. And so now that I have these two ends, I'm just going to knot this really firmly, and I'm going to push that knot as close to the fabric as I can to the point of origin, so it kind of stays in there nice and tight. Okay, so I've given that one a nice 3 knots. And I'm going to go ahead and just stuff the yarn in there. That can be part of the filling. At this point, it would be incredibly difficult to do a weaving in. You could do it if you'd like. I think it's quite the challenge to make that happen. So there's one ear, and you're going to give 3 to 4 stitches in between. So I think we're going to put the other ear right here. So 1, 2, 3. Put it there and do the exact same thing. So I'm just going to pull this through, and again kind of pulling this tail through so it's kind of close to the same side, and then give it 1 stitch in between. And again, go ahead and knot that. And like we did with the tail, I'm doing 3 knots because this is not a decorative piece. Any cat who gets a hold of this will probably be a little rough on it. And I'm going to go ahead and tuck this in. All right, so now we've got the ears on, and we can go ahead and continue. And so row 14 now, we're going to single crochet 1 and decrease every other stitch. So now we're really starting to pull it in, get that the little snout going on for our mouse. Undo my stitch marker. And I'm just going to kind of push them ears out to the side right now. Decrease. As you can see, it gets really hard kind of to work with it towards the end because you're running out of room. But if you're patient with it, you'll be able to get that last little bit finished up. So now that we have finished with row 14, we can go ahead and put the eyes in at row 13. So we want to go a couple up. And with safety eyes, you want to position them a couple rows before what you're doing, but you want to make sure that you position them first. They work like this. They're kind of a little cup that holds the eye in. This part, the crochet work will go between the cup and the eye itself, but this is so you know how it looks. And so we're going to put it a couple of rows up. So not this row, but the previous one. I like to put it right near the ears. Give it a couple rows in between. Got his eyes there. And then, like I said, you want to make sure that you're really certain about where you're putting the eyes in before you do this, because they're really difficult to get apart. I am going to turn this just almost inside out. And then you just kind of push it past that first little ridge on the eye. And do the same with the second one. All right, so there are our little eyes. And now we can go ahead and finish with row 15, and that's going to be a decrease all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead, it's a decrease every stitch. So it's going to get really, really tight to work in there. But it will make for a very nice little snout. And put my stitch marker back in. Like I said, it does get kind of awkward to work at the very end of this project, but if you just take your time. And there's the end of the mouse. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and do a fasten off. And give it a little extra space because I'm also going to use this to sew the little mouth, the little snout closed. And you can, this is a part where the yarn needle might be helpful, but you can do it without. You just kind of have to use your hook to go across the ends. That part there. Make sure it's nice and strong because we don't want any issues for getting that all undone by a cat. I'm going to go ahead and weave the end way back into the body. Now we've got the ends woven in there. And so you'll also want to consider whether or not you want to leave the tail, the end of the tail loose, or if you want to weave that in as well. And if you weave it in, it's just going to be a question of going back through the chain. And you don't have to go through, you know, all the way. You can cut off part of it like we just did there. And just weave it in a bit. When you're weaving in on the chain, though, you have to be kind of careful that you don't pull too hard in case you accidentally grab one of your chains. So just kind of go gently. All right. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut that little excess bit off. And the amount that you choose to weave in, as long as you're doing just a little bit, give it a little bit of stability in there and kind of tuck that end away. Whatever you choose is fine. All right, and so there is our completed mouse, and hopefully your cat enjoys playing with it, and I hope you enjoyed making it. Thanks again.